The iPad slipped from my hands and clattered onto the kitchen table. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. There on the screen, bright as day, was a confirmation email for a luxury resort in Bali. 2 adults. Premium ocean view villa. Couples massage package. Romantic beachfront dinner for 2. The reservation name read, Trevor Harrison and Vanessa Patterson. My hands shook as I picked up the device again, scrolling through the screenshots I'd accidentally stumbled upon while looking for Bailey's math worksheet. There were more. So many more. Text messages between Trevor and Vanessa, discussing what she should pack. A message about how, this will drive Naomi crazy when she finds out, followed by a laughing emoji. Another about how he couldn't wait to finally have a real vacation with someone who actually appreciates luxury. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, the Tuesday morning sun streaming through the window, highlighting the coffee cups and breakfast dishes like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My entire world had just shattered, and I hadn't even finished loading the dishwasher. Mom, did you find my worksheet? Bailey called from the living room, her 8-year-old voice cutting through my shock. I quickly closed the iPad and pressed my palm against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. Give me a minute, baby. My mind raced backward, piecing together things I'd ignored. 3 weeks ago, Trevor had come home and announced he had a mandatory business conference in Asia. He worked in pharmaceutical sales and conferences weren't unusual, but something about this one had felt different. He'd been too excited. Too secretive about the details. I stood up on shaking legs and walked to the sink, gripping the counter. Through the window, I could see our neighbor Mrs. Patterson watering her roses. Normal life continued everywhere except inside my chest, where everything was collapsing. Vanessa Patterson. His college girlfriend. The one he'd dated for 3 years before we met. The one whose Facebook friend request he'd accepted 6 months ago, claiming it was just old friends reconnecting. The one who had started commenting on his posts with inside jokes I didn't understand. The one I'd asked him about, only to be told I was being paranoid and insecure. I opened the iPad again with trembling fingers. I needed to see it all. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The messages went back 4 months. 4 months of planning, flirting, and him complaining about me. She's let herself go since Bailey was born. She doesn't understand me anymore. Remember when we talked about going to Bali someday? Let's finally do it. My stomach turned. I'd gained 20 pounds after Bailey was born, sure, but I'd also been raising our daughter mostly alone while he traveled for work. I'd given up my career as an architect to support his promotion that required constant travel. I'd become the person he needed me to be, and apparently, that person wasn't good enough. Mom? Bailey appeared in the doorway, her braids bouncing. Are you okay? You look weird. I forced a smile and closed the iPad. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just remembered something I forgot to do. Let's find that worksheet. But I wasn't fine. As I helped Bailey with her fractions, my mind was working overtime. The trip was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. He'd already told me he'd be gone for 10 days. He'd already kissed me goodbye in advance, practiced his sympathetic face about having to miss Bailey's school play. He thought he was so clever. He thought I'd find out through social media or a neighbor's comment and come crawling back, jealous and desperate to win him back. He thought he could manipulate me into fighting for a marriage he'd already destroyed. As I sat there watching Bailey carefully work through her math problems, something cold and clear settled in my chest. Not heartbreak yet, that would come later. Right now it was something else. Something sharp and focused. Trevor wanted to play games. He wanted to make me jealous, to hurt me, to prove he still had power over my emotions. He wanted me to discover his betrayal and fall apart. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. I'd spent 8 years making myself smaller, quieter, and more convenient for him. I'd erased my own dreams to support his. I'd become so focused on being the perfect wife that I'd forgotten I was a whole person before I ever met Trevor Harrison. Looking at those messages, seeing how little he valued everything I'd sacrificed, something inside me shifted. The hurt was there, massive and threatening, but underneath it was something stronger. Anger. Determination. And a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If Trevor wanted to take a luxury trip to Bali with his ex-girlfriend, fine. Let him go. Let him think he'd won. Because while he was sipping cocktails on a beach with Vanessa, I was going to plan the greatest disappearing act he'd ever seen. I wasn't going to fight for him. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of my jealousy or my pain. I was going to do something much better. I was going to leave. That night, I lay in bed next to Trevor, listening to him breathe. He was scrolling through his phone, probably texting Vanessa, while I pretended to read a book. The words blurred on the page. I couldn't focus on anything except the weight of what I knew. "You're quiet tonight," Trevor said without looking up from his screen. "Everything okay?" I marked my page and set the book down. "Just tired. Bailey had a lot of homework." He wasn't really listening. He never really listened anymore. I studied his profile in the lamplight. When had I stopped seeing him clearly? He was handsome, that hadn't changed. Tall, fit, with the kind of confident smile that made people trust him. That smile had sold me on forever when I was 25 and fresh out of graduate school. "When do you leave for your conference again?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Week from Thursday." "I told you already." There was an edge of irritation in his voice. "I'll be gone 10 days. Maybe 11 if the meetings run long." "Right. Isha." "Which city again?" "Singapore." The lie came so easily to him. "Big pharma conference. All the major companies will be there." I nodded and picked up my book again. "Singapore. Not Bali." He'd practiced this lie until it was smooth. I wondered how many other lies I'd swallowed over the years, too trusting to question them. As I lay there pretending to read, my mind drifted back over the past few months. The signs had been there. I'd just been too busy, too tired, too invested in keeping our family functioning to see them. It started 3 months ago. Trevor had suddenly become interested in working out again. He'd bought new clothes, expensive ones, without consulting me about the budget. He'd changed his cologne to something different, something I hadn't picked out. When I'd commented on it, he'd shrugged and said he needed a change. Then came the phone habits. He'd started keeping his phone face down on every surface. He'd added a passcode I didn't know. When it buzzed during dinner, he'd glance at it with a little smile that never included me. If I asked who was texting, he'd say, "Just work stuff," and change the subject. 2 months ago, he'd started coming home later. "Business dinners," he said. "Networking events." His career was taking off and I should be supportive. When I'd asked to come along to one of these dinners, he'd looked at me like I'd suggested something ridiculous. "It's boring work stuff, Naomi. You'd hate it." I believed him. Or maybe I'd chosen to believe him because the alternative was too frightening to consider. 6 weeks ago, he'd started picking fights over nothing. The house wasn't clean enough, even though I'd spent all day cleaning. Dinner wasn't ready on time, even though he'd come home 2 hours earlier than he'd said. I wasn't making enough effort with my appearance, even though I'd stopped having time for myself years ago. Now I understood. He'd been building a case against me in his own mind, justifying what he was about to do. If he could paint me as the bad wife, the neglectful wife, the wife who didn't appreciate him, then sneaking off to Bali with his ex-girlfriend was somehow my fault. "I'm thinking about repainting the living room while you're gone," I said into the silence. "Something brighter." Trevor finally looked up from his phone. "What?" "The color is fine. I just want to change. Something fresh." He studied me for a moment and I kept my expression neutral. "Whatever. Do what you want. It's not like I'll be here to see the mess anyway." He went back to his phone, dismissing me. 3 years ago, he would have had opinions about paint colors. He would have wanted to help choose. He would have cared about making our house a home. But that Trevor, if he'd ever really existed, was long gone. I turned off my lamp and rolled onto my side, facing away from him. In the darkness, I let my mind work through what needed to happen. 2 weeks wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. First thing tomorrow, I'd call Rochelle. She was the only friend who'd stuck around after Trevor had systematically cut me off from everyone else. He'd done it slowly so I hadn't noticed. Comments about how my friends were bad influences, or drama. Scheduling conflicts that kept me from girls' nights. Eventually I'd stop trying. But Rochelle had refused to fade away. She kept calling, kept inviting me to coffee, kept reminding me that I existed outside of being Trevor's wife and Bailey's mother. I talked to her first. Then I needed a lawyer. A good one. Someone who could move quickly and quietly. I'd need to understand my rights, what I was entitled to, how to protect Bailey through all of this. I'd need to figure out where to go. My sister Simone lived in Charleston. We'd been close before I'd married Trevor, before he'd discouraged me from visiting her because she put ideas in your head about being independent. Simone had an extra room. She'd take us in without questions. Money. That was crucial. The savings account was joint, but the inheritance from my mother, that was mine alone. $60,000 that Trevor didn't control. I'd been saving it for Bailey's college, but this was more important. This was survival. I need to be smart. I couldn't let Trevor suspect anything. For the next 2 weeks, I had to be the perfect wife. Supportive about his trip. Sweet. Unsuspecting. I had to play the role he expected while I dismantled our entire life behind the scenes. Next to me, Trevor's breathing had evened out into sleep. His phone was still in his hand, the screen dark. I wondered if Vanessa was lying awake too, excited about their romantic getaway. Did she know he was married? Did she care? It didn't matter. She could have him. They deserved each other. What mattered was Bailey. What mattered was getting out before Trevor's cruelty damaged me beyond repair. What mattered was teaching my daughter that women don't stay with men who treat them like they're disposable. I'd loved Trevor once. Really loved him. I'd believed in us, in our future, in the life we were building. I'd shaped myself into what he wanted, thinking that's what marriage meant. But lying there in the dark, I realized something. The person I'd become in this marriage wasn't who I really was. She was who Trevor needed me to be: small, dependent, grateful. The real me, the woman who'd graduated top of her architecture class, who'd had dreams and ambitions and fire, she was still in here somewhere, buried under years of making herself less. It was time to dig her out. Trevor stirred beside me, rolling over and throwing an arm across my waist in his sleep. Once that gesture had made me feel loved and safe. Now it felt like a chain. In 2 weeks, he'd board a plane to Bali with his ex-girlfriend, thinking he'd won. Thinking he'd successfully hurt me, made me jealous and put me in my place. He had no idea that by the time he got back, I'd be gone. And this time I wasn't coming back. I called Rochelle the next morning from the grocery store parking lot. Bailey was at school, and Trevor had already left for work, kissing my cheek absently on his way out like he hadn't spent the previous night texting another woman in our bed. "Girl, I haven't heard from you in 3 weeks, Rochelle answered, and I could hear the concern in her voice. "I was about to show up at your house." "I need your help," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. 30 minutes later, we were sitting in a coffee shop 3 towns over, far enough that no one Trevor knew would see us. I showed her everything on the iPad. She didn't say a word until she'd read it all, but I watched her jaw tighten with every swipe. "That piece of trash," she finally said, sliding the iPad back to me. "Naomi, I'm so sorry." "I'm not going to cry about it," I said, surprised to find it was true. "I'm going to leave." Rochelle's eyes widened. "Leave? Like actually leave? While he's in Bali with her? I need to move fast and I need help." "Anything. What do you need?" I pulled out a notebook where I'd written everything down at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. "First, a lawyer. Do you know anyone?" Rochelle nodded slowly. "My cousin Tasha. She does divorce law. She's tough and she's discreet. I'll text her right now." While Rochelle typed on her phone, I continued. "I need to move my inheritance money without Trevor knowing. Can I do that?" "That money was from your mother, right? Only your name on it?" "Yes." "Then it's yours. Move it. Today." Rochelle looked up from her phone. "Tasha can see you this afternoon at 2. I told her it's an emergency." Relief flooded through me. This was really happening. I was really doing this. For the next 2 hours, Rochelle and I planned. She offered to help me pack while Trevor was at work. She'd store boxes at her house so he wouldn't see them. She'd be my alibi if Trevor asked where I was during all my appointments. "What about Bailey?" Rochelle asked. "Does she know?" "Not yet. I'll tell her after everything is in place. She loves her dad and I don't want to put her in the middle." My chest tightened thinking about it. This is going to hurt her. Staying would hurt her more. Rochelle reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "She needs to see her mother be strong. She needs to learn that we don't accept being treated like we're nothing." At 2 o'clock, I sat in Tasha Morrison's office, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Tasha was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with intelligent eyes and an air of complete competence. "Rochelle filled me in on the basics," she said, settling behind her desk. "Tell me everything." I did. I showed her the iPad, the messages, the hotel reservations. I told her about our finances, our house, my inheritance. I told her about Bailey. Tasha took notes on her laptop, her expression neutral and professional. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "Today you're going to open a new bank account at a different bank. Transfer your inheritance there immediately. That money is separate property, he has no claim to it." I nodded, writing everything down. "Next, I need you to document everything. Take photos of all financial records, tax returns, bank statements, credit card bills. Everything. Do you have access to his computer?" "Yes." "He doesn't know I know his password." "Good." "Forward yourself any relevant emails about finances or property. We need a complete picture of your assets before we file." "How fast can this move?" I asked. "If you get me everything I need by the end of this week, I can have papers drawn up and ready to serve the day he leaves for his trip. By the time he gets back, you'll be gone and the divorce will be filed. It felt surreal, hearing her lay it out so matter-of-factly. My marriage was ending and we were discussing it like a business transaction. What about custody? My voice shook on the question. South Carolina is where you're moving, correct? With your sister? When I nodded, Tasha continued. We'll file for primary custody with him having visitation rights. Given that you've been the primary caregiver and he's been, she glanced at her notes, traveling extensively for work and carrying on an extramarital affair, we have a strong case. Will he fight me on this? Probably. Men like this usually do, not because they want the child, but because they want to punish you. Tasha's expression softened slightly. But we'll be ready for that. Document everything about Bailey's routine, her school, her doctor appointments. Show that you're the stable parent. I left Tasha's office with a folder full of forms and instructions. My hands were shaking as I drove to a different bank across town and opened a new account. The banker, a kind older woman named Patricia, processed everything efficiently. When the $60,000 from my mother's life insurance settlement appeared in my new account, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in days. This was my escape fund. My fresh start fund. My never going back fund. The next few days passed in a blur of secret activity. Every time Trevor left for work, I became a spy in my own house. I photographed tax returns, bank statements, investment accounts, and property deeds. I forwarded myself emails from Trevor's computer about bonuses, retirement accounts, and the rental property he owned that he'd somehow never mentioned to me. That discovery had made me physically ill. A rental property in Florida that brought in $2,000 a month, and he'd never said a word. How much more was he hiding? I found more evidence of the affair. Receipts for jewelry I'd never received. Charges at expensive restaurants on nights he'd claimed to be working late. Hotel rooms in our own city. This had been going on longer than 4 months. Much longer. Each discovery made me angrier, but it also made me more determined. I documented everything with cold precision. Every lie. Every dollar spent on Vanessa. Every piece of evidence that Trevor Harrison was not the man he pretended to be. At night, I lay beside him and played the loving wife. I asked about his day. I laughed at his jokes. I packed his lunch. I pressed his shirts for work. He had no idea that during the day I was systematically preparing to destroy the life he thought he controlled. A week before his trip, I started packing. Not obviously just a few things at a time. Bailey's favorite toys. Our important documents. Photo albums. Clothes we'd need. I packed it all into boxes that Rochelle picked up each afternoon and stored in her garage. I contacted the school in Charleston and got Bailey enrolled. I found us a small apartment near my sister's house, paid the deposit and first month's rent with my inheritance money. I arranged for a moving company to collect our furniture the day after Trevor left for Bali. I even called my old boss from the architecture firm where I'd worked before Bailey was born. I'm relocating to Charleston, I told him. Do you know anyone hiring down there? He did. He made a call for me. 3 days later, I had a job interview scheduled via video call. I did the interview in my car during my grocery shopping trip, and 2 days after that, I had a job offer. Not as senior as my old position, but it was a start. It was a way forward. Everything was falling into place. Bailey sensed something was different. Mom, why are you so happy lately? She asked one evening while I helped her with her bath. I'm always happy, baby. No, you're different. You're singing again. You used to sing all the time, but then you stopped. I hadn't realized I'd stopped singing. But she was right. I had. Somewhere along the way I'd lost my music. I'm just having a good week, I told her, kissing her forehead. The night before Trevor left for his trip, he actually tried to have sex with me. I nearly laughed at the audacity. Instead, I claimed I wasn't feeling well, and he rolled over with an annoyed sigh. I'll be gone 10 days, he said into the darkness. Try to miss me. I will, I lied. But inside, I was counting down the hours until my freedom began. Trevor's alarm went off at 4 in the morning. His flight to Singapore left at 7, and he wanted to beat the traffic to the airport. I'd barely slept, adrenaline keeping me alert and focused. I got up with him and made coffee, playing my part one last time. He was in an unusually good mood, humming as he showered and dressed. Why wouldn't he be? He was about to spend 10 days in paradise with his ex-girlfriend while his unsuspecting wife stayed home with their child. I'm going to miss you, he said, pulling me into a hug in the kitchen. He smelled like the expensive cologne he'd bought for Vanessa. Hold down the fort while I'm gone. Of course, I said against his chest. Have a safe flight. I'll text you when I land. Another lie. He wouldn't text me. He'd be too busy with Vanessa. Bailey was still asleep when he left. He kissed her forehead gently, and for a moment, I saw something real in his expression. He did love her in his own selfish way. But love without respect, without responsibility, without integrity, that wasn't enough. I walked him to the door and waved as he pulled out of the driveway. His taillights disappeared around the corner, and I stood there in my bathrobe watching the sun start to rise. Then I closed the door, locked it, and got to work. First, I called Rochelle. He's gone. I'm on my way. By the time Bailey woke up at 7, I had coffee brewing and pancakes on the griddle. Special breakfast, I told her. We need to talk about something. Bailey climbed onto a kitchen stool, her eyes curious. Am I in trouble? No, baby. Never. I slid a plate of pancakes in front of her and took a deep breath. We're going on an adventure. What kind of adventure? We're going to move to Charleston to live near Aunt Simone for a while. Bailey's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Move? Like leave our house? Yes. Today. But what about Dad? And school? And my friends? This was the hard part. I sat down next to her and took her hand. Your dad and I are having some grown-up problems. We're going to live separately for a while. You'll still see him, I promise. But you and I need a fresh start in a new place. Is it because of me? Her voice was small and my heart cracked. No, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you. You are perfect. This is about grown-up stuff that I'll explain more when you're older. But I need you to trust me, okay? This is going to be good for us. Bailey was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she asked, will I like Charleston? I think you're going to love it. Aunt Simone lives near the beach. Your new school has an amazing art program. And we're going to have our own place, just you and me. Can I bring all my stuffed animals? I smiled through the tears threatening to fall. Every single one. By the time Rochelle arrived at 8, Bailey was cautiously excited about the move. Kids were resilient like that, especially when they didn't know the full truth yet. The rest of the morning was organized chaos. The movers arrived at 9 to collect the furniture I'd selected: my grandmother's dining table that Trevor had always hated, the bookshelf I'd bought before we got married, Bailey's bedroom set, and boxes of kitchen items. Everything that was mine or Bailey's. I left him the couch he'd picked out, the TV he loved more than he loved me, and the bed where he'd lain next to me while texting another woman. I left the house clean and empty. Not out of respect for him, but because I refused to let him paint me as bitter or cruel. The divorce papers sat in an envelope on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker he'd use when he got home. By noon we were done. The house that had been my home for 8 years looked hollow and strange with half its furniture gone. Bailey wandered through the empty rooms, saying goodbye to each one. Can we drive by my school? She asked. I want to say goodbye. We did. We drove slowly past her school, past the park where she'd learned to ride a bike, past the library where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings. Bailey pressed her hand against the window, and I knew she was trying to memorize it all. Change is scary, I told her as we drove. But sometimes it's necessary. And sometimes, it leads us to something better. Are you scared, Mom? Terrified, I admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. Rochelle followed us to the airport in her car so she could drive Bailey's car back and sell it for me later. At the terminal, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. You're the bravest person I know, she whispered. Call me when you land. Thank you for everything. For not letting me disappear. That's what real friends do. Our flight to Charleston left at 3. As the plane lifted off the runway, I felt the weight of 8 years slide off my shoulders. Bailey pressed her face to the window, watching our city get smaller and smaller below us. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. Already there were 3 texts from Trevor's mother, asking if I could send her Bailey's school picture. She had no idea her son was in Bali with his ex-girlfriend. She had no idea her son had destroyed our family. I'd tell her eventually. But not today. Today was about moving forward. I opened my email and found a message from the process server Tasha had hired. Papers delivered to residents at 12 p.m. Photograph attached showing envelope placement as requested. It was done. The papers were waiting. By the time Trevor touched down in Bali and checked his phone, he'd have a message from our home security system showing the movers, showing Rochelle and me carrying boxes, showing his life being dismantled while he was 30,000 feet in the air. I wondered what his face would look like when he realized. Would he panic? Would he call Vanessa and ruin their trip? Would he understand finally that actions had consequences? Part of me hoped it destroyed their vacation. Part of me hoped Vanessa saw who he really was, a man who would lie to everyone, including her. But mostly, I hoped I never had to think about either of them again. Mom? Bailey tugged on my sleeve. What are you thinking about? Our new life, I said and smiled. I'm thinking about how much better it's going to be. She leaned against my shoulder and I wrapped my arm around her. We were flying toward uncertainty, toward challenge, toward a future I couldn't quite see yet. But we were flying toward freedom. And that was worth everything. The plane touched down in Charleston at 6 in the evening. The airport was smaller than the one we'd left behind, less overwhelming. Bailey held my hand tight as we walked through the terminal, our carry-on bags bumping against our legs. There they are. Simone's voice rang out above the crowd. My sister pushed through the people waiting at arrivals and swept Bailey up into a hug, then pulled me in too. Simone was 2 years older than me with the same dark brown skin and bright eyes, but where I'd learned to make myself small, she'd never dimmed her light for anyone. I can't believe you finally did it, she whispered in my ear. I'm so proud of you. The drive to her house took 20 minutes. Bailey chattered the whole way, asking questions about the beach, about her new school, about everything. Simone answered patiently, making silly jokes that had Bailey giggling in the back seat. I watched the city pass by through the window. Charleston was different from what we'd left behind. The streets were lined with palm trees and old houses with wide porches. The air smelled like salt water and possibility. Everything felt lighter here, brighter. Or maybe that was just freedom. Simone lived in a cozy house painted blue with white shutters. She'd set up the guest room for Bailey with fresh sheets and some stuffed animals from her own childhood. Until your furniture arrives, she explained. Bailey explored the house while Simone made us tea in her kitchen. How are you really doing? She asked once we were alone. I don't know yet. It doesn't feel real. Has he called? I checked my phone. 7 missed calls. 12 texts. I didn't open them. Yeah. I'm not answering. Good. Let him panic. Simone poured hot water over tea bags. Your furniture gets here tomorrow? Late morning. And I can move into the apartment on Saturday. Stay as long as you need. It's nice having you here. She handed me a mug. I missed you, Naomi. I missed my sister. Trevor took you away from me. I let him. Don't do that. Don't blame yourself for what he did. He isolated you on purpose. That's what people like him do. They cut you off from everyone who might tell you the truth. She was right. Looking back, I could see it clearly. The way he'd discouraged me from visiting Simone. The way he'd made me feel guilty for spending time with friends. The way he'd convinced me that being a good wife meant centering my entire life around him. That night, Bailey fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day. I lay in the other guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to my phone buzz over and over with Trevor's calls. Finally, at 10 o'clock, I opened his texts. Where are you? Naomi, answer your phone. What the hell is going on? Why are movers at our house? I came home to divorce papers. This is insane. Call me now. You can't just take Bailey without telling me. That's kidnapping. Fine. Be childish. I'll fly back tomorrow and we'll sort this out. I nearly laughed at that last one. He was in Bali with Vanessa and he was calling me childish. I typed out one response. My lawyer will be in contact. Do not call me again. All communication goes through her from now on. Then I blocked his number. My phone immediately rang. Vanessa calling from Trevor's phone. I blocked that too. Finally, silence. I pulled up Tasha's number and sent her a text. He knows. He's threatening to fly back early. Says I kidnapped Bailey. Her response came quickly. Document everything. Save all texts and voicemails. He can't prove kidnapping. You have every right to relocate with your child when you're the primary caregiver. Don't respond to him. Let me handle it. I fell asleep feeling safer than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to sun streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came back, and instead of dread, I felt something close to excitement. Bailey and I walked to a nearby diner for breakfast. The morning was cool and pleasant, so different from the harsh winters I'd left behind. We ordered pancakes and orange juice, and Bailey told me about the dream she'd had about dolphins. Can we go to the beach today? She asked. The movers are coming. How about tomorrow? Okay. Mom? She looked at me seriously. Are you and Dad going to get divorced? There it was. The question I'd known was coming. I put down my fork and reached for her hand. Yes, baby. We are. Because he did something bad? Because we're not good together anymore. Sometimes people change, or maybe they were never as good together as they thought. Your dad and I, we want different things now. Will I still see him? Of course. He's your father and he loves you. You'll visit him and he'll call you. That won't change. She nodded slowly, processing. Keisha from my old school, her parents are divorced. She has 2 bedrooms and 2 Christmases. She says it's not that bad. Kids, I thought. They surprise you with their resilience. The movers arrived at 11 with our furniture. Simone and I directed them while Bailey played in the yard. By 2 o'clock, our things were safely in storage until the apartment was ready. That afternoon, I had my video interview with the architecture firm where I'd be starting work. I set up my laptop in Simone's dining room, made sure my hair looked professional, and took a deep breath before clicking the link. The interview went well. The hiring manager, a woman named Patricia Chin, I stopped mid-thought. Chin was on my no-use list. I couldn't use that name. Let me revise. The hiring manager, a woman named Patricia Foster, was warm and encouraging. We talked about my past projects, my design philosophy, and my reasons for relocating. I'm looking for a fresh start, I told her honestly. I gave up my career when my daughter was born, and I'm ready to reclaim that part of myself. We love that, Patricia said. And we believe in supporting working mothers here. We have flexible hours and a great childcare referral network. The call ended with her promising to send over the formal offer letter by Monday. I closed my laptop and sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. I had a job. I had a future. I had a plan. My phone buzzed with an email from Tasha. Trevor's attorney has been in touch. He wants to negotiate custody. We have a meeting scheduled for next week via video conference. Prepare yourself, this is going to get ugly. I'd expected that. Men like Trevor didn't lose control gracefully. That evening, Simone, Bailey, and I had dinner on her back porch. The sun set in shades of pink and orange, and the air was full of the sound of crickets and distant music from a neighbor's house. To new beginnings, Simone said, raising her glass of lemonade. Bailey and I clinked our glasses against hers. To new beginnings. Later, after Bailey was asleep, Simone and I sat on her porch swing with glasses of wine. How long did you know it was bad? She asked. I think I always knew a little. But I kept thinking I could fix it. That if I was better, more patient, more understanding, he'd go back to being the man I married. Was he ever that man? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know. Maybe I invented him. Maybe I saw what I wanted to see. You deserve better than what he gave you. I deserve better than what I accepted, I corrected. That's the part one have to own. I stayed longer than I should have. I made myself smaller than I needed to be. But you left. That's what matters. She was right. I'd left. I'd saved myself and Bailey. I'd chosen the hard, scary path instead of the familiar, painful one. That was worth celebrating. The next day was Saturday, moving day. The apartment I'd rented was small but bright, with big windows and hardwood floors. It was on the second floor of an old house that had been converted into units, with a shared yard where Bailey could play. We spent the day unpacking and arranging furniture. Bailey chose which wall she wanted her bed against and helped me hang up her drawings. Simone brought over groceries and helped me stock the kitchen. By evening it actually looked like a home. Not the showplace I'd maintained for Trevor, where everything had to be perfect. This was cozy and lived in, with Bailey's toys scattered on the living room floor and my books stacked on shelves. That night, Bailey and I ate pizza sitting on the floor because I hadn't unpacked the dining table yet. She told me about the kids she'd seen playing in the yard, how she hoped they'd be her friends. I like it here, she said. It feels like us. It is us. Just us. After she went to bed, I stood in the middle of my new living room and looked around. Nothing here belonged to Trevor. Nothing here held memories of arguments or silence or loneliness. This was mine. I pulled out my phone and unblocked Trevor's number just to see what I'd missed. 43 text messages. 21 voicemails. I didn't read or listen to any of them. I just needed to know. Then I blocked him again and opened my email instead. There was a message from Patricia Foster at the architecture firm. I opened it with shaking hands. Welcome to the team, Naomi. We're excited to have you start Monday. Monday. 3 days away. 3 days until I began reclaiming the career I'd abandoned. 3 days until I was someone other than Trevor's wife. I was Naomi Grant again. Not Naomi Harrison. I'd kept my maiden name professionally, but somewhere along the way I'd lost her anyway. It was time to find her again. Trevor returned from Bali on a Tuesday, 5 days after I'd left. I only knew because Tasha called me that afternoon. He's back, she said. And he's furious. His lawyer called me this morning demanding an emergency custody hearing. They're claiming you committed parental kidnapping by taking Bailey out of state. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? You said I had the right to relocate. You do have that right. And he knows it. This is posturing. He's trying to scare you into coming back. Tasha's voice was calm and confident. Let him waste his money on legal fees. We have documentation showing you've been Bailey's primary caregiver. We have proof of his affair. We have evidence he was planning to abandon both of you for 10 days while he vacationed with another woman. No judge is going to side with him. What do I need to do? Keep doing what you're doing. Document everything with Bailey, her routine, her adjustment to the new school, her happiness. Take photos. Keep receipts. Show that you're providing a stable, loving environment. And whatever you do, don't respond to his attempts to contact you directly. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and tried to steady my breathing. This was what Tasha had warned me about. Trevor wouldn't accept losing control quietly. He'd fight, not because he wanted Bailey but because he wanted to punish me. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "You're destroying our family. How can you be so selfish?" Trevor using a different phone. I screenshot the message and sent it to Tasha, then blocked the number. 5 minutes later, another unknown number: "Bailey needs her father. You're hurting her to hurt me." Screenshot. Send to Tasha. Block. Again, fine. You want to play hardball? I'll make sure you don't see a cent. I'll bury you in legal fees. Screenshot. Send to Tasha. Block. It went on for 2 hours. He must have bought burner phones or borrowed phones from friends. Each message was more desperate, more angry, more revealing of who he really was. Finally, Tasha texted me, "Stop blocking him. Let him keep sending these. They're helping our case." So I let the messages come. I didn't read them, I just screenshot each one as it appeared and forwarded it to Tasha. By the end of the day there were 63 messages. "This is perfect," Tasha told me when she called that evening. "He's showing a pattern of harassment. He's threatening you financially. He's using emotional manipulation. Any judge who sees these will recognize what we're dealing with." "What about Vanessa?" I asked. "Is she still in the picture?" "Funny you should ask. I heard through a mutual contact that she's furious with him. Apparently he spent most of their Bali trip on his phone dealing with the divorce, and when she realized he was still married when they reconnected, she lost it. She thought he was divorced already." I felt a tiny spark of satisfaction. So she didn't know. She claims she didn't. Who knows if that's true. But either way, from what I understand, she wants nothing to do with him now. She realizes she was a pawn in his game to manipulate you. Good. They'd both gotten exactly what they deserved. That weekend, I took Bailey to the beach for the first time. We built sandcastles and collected shells, and she laughed in a way I hadn't heard in months. I took photos of her running through the waves, her braids flying behind her, joy written all over her face. This was what childhood should look like. Not tiptoeing around a father's moods. Not sensing tension between parents. Not learning that love meant accepting cruelty. On Monday I started my new job. I'd found a great after-school program for Bailey, and Simone had agreed to pick her up on days when I had to work late. Walking into the architecture firm felt like coming home. The smell of blueprint paper, the sound of people discussing designs, the creative energy in the air, I'd missed this so much. Patricia Foster greeted me warmly and introduced me to the team. There were 12 people in the office, ranging from junior designers to senior architects. Everyone was friendly and welcoming. "We're working on a mixed-use development downtown," Patricia explained, showing me to my desk. "Retail on the ground floor, apartments above. The client wants something modern but sympathetic to Charleston's historic architecture. I thought you could help with the facade design." I looked at the preliminary sketches and felt my brain light up with ideas. It had been 8 years since I'd done this kind of work, but it came flooding back. "I have some thoughts," I said. Patricia smiled. "I hoped you would. Let's hear them." I spent my first day sketching, researching, and brainstorming. The work was challenging and engaging, and for hours at a time, I forgot about Trevor and divorce proceedings and custody battles. I was just Naomi, architect, doing work I loved. When I picked up Bailey that afternoon, she was full of stories about her new school. She'd made a friend named Isabella who liked to draw horses. Her teacher was nice. The art room had supplies she'd never seen before. "Can Isabella come over sometime?" she asked as we drove home. "Of course. Anytime." That night, as I helped Bailey with her homework at our small kitchen table, my phone rang. Trevor's mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Eleanor." "Naomi." Her voice was cold. "I think we need to talk." "I'm happy to talk. But if you're calling to convince me to go back to Trevor, you're wasting your time." "Go back to him? After what he did?" Eleanor's voice shook. "I called to apologize. Trevor finally told me the truth. Well, his version of it. But I spoke to that attorney of yours, Tasha, and she told me what really happened. What really went on. I was silent, shocked. I'm ashamed of my son, Eleanor continued. I raised him better than this. To cheat on his wife, to lie to everyone, to try to manipulate you with that trip. I'm disgusted. Eleanor, please let me finish. I want you to know that I support you. Completely. Whatever you need, whatever Bailey needs, I'm here. And when this goes to court, if you need me to testify about what kind of father Trevor has actually been, absent, distracted, more interested in his career than his family, I'll do it. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. You're a good mother, Naomi. You're a good woman. My son is a fool. She paused. Can I still see Bailey? I understand if you don't want me to, but she's my granddaughter and I love her. Of course you can see her. You can video call anytime. And when things settle down, visits too. You didn't do anything wrong. After we hung up, I sat for a moment, processing. Trevor's own mother had sided with me. The woman who'd raised him, who knew him better than anyone, had looked at the situation and chosen me. That night, I let myself cry for the first time since I'd found those screenshots. Not for Trevor, I didn't miss him at all. Not for my marriage that had been dead longer than I'd wanted to admit. I cried for the years I'd lost. For the version of myself I'd buried. For the energy I'd wasted trying to fix something that was never going to work. But when the tears stopped, I felt lighter. Cleaner. Ready. The next morning, Tasha called with news. Trevor's attorney has agreed to mediation. They've dropped the kidnapping claims. They knew those were going nowhere. Now they want to negotiate custody and assets. When? 2 weeks. Video conference. I'll prepare you for everything. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until I'd have to see Trevor's face again, even if just on a screen. 2 weeks until we'd divide up 8 years of marriage like splitting the check at a restaurant. I'm ready, I told her. And I was. 3 months passed in a blur of work, parenting, and slowly building a life I'd never imagined possible. The divorce mediation had been brutal. Trevor tried to fight me on every asset, every decision, every detail. But Tasha had been brilliant, and his own behavior had worked against him. The messages, the harassment, the affair, his abandonment of parental duties, it all added up to a picture no mediator could ignore. In the end, we'd reached an agreement. I got primary custody, with Trevor having Bailey every other weekend and alternating holidays. I got half the house proceeds when it sold. I got half his retirement account. I got child support that would actually help Bailey have the life she deserved. And most importantly, I got out. The divorce wouldn't be final for another 3 months, but the hard part was over. Now I could focus on building instead of escaping. My job at the architecture firm was going better than I'd dared hope. My facade design for the downtown development had impressed the clients so much that they'd requested I stay on the project through completion. Patricia had hinted at a promotion if I kept performing at this level. You have an eye for blending old and new, she told me during my 3-month review. It's exactly what Charleston needs. Designers who respect the history but aren't afraid to push forward. I'd been putting in long hours, but good ones. Creative ones. Hours that made me feel alive instead of drained. And Bailey was thriving too. She loved her school, had 3 close friends now, and had joined an art club that met on Wednesdays. The biggest change, though, was in me. One Saturday morning, I woke up early and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who'd discovered those screenshots 4 months ago. I'd lost weight without trying, not from stress, but from moving more, from having energy again. I'd cut my hair into a short, natural style that I'd always wanted, but Trevor had discouraged. I prefer long hair on women, he'd always said, so I'd kept it long. Now it was short, shaped close to my head, and I loved it. It made me look strong. I looked like myself again. That afternoon I took Bailey shopping. Not to the discount stores where I'd learned to stretch Trevor's allowance for household expenses. He'd controlled all our money so tightly. No, I took her to nice stores and I let her pick out clothes she actually liked instead of the practical, boring things I'd defaulted to. We bought bright colors and fun patterns. We bought silly socks with rainbows. We bought a dress for her that was completely impractical but made her feel like a princess. Then I shopped for myself. Really shopped for the first time in years. I tried on clothes and styles I'd forgotten I liked. Bold prints. Well-tailored blazers. Dresses that showed I had a shape. Shoes that weren't just sensible. In the dressing room, trying on a red dress that hugged my curves, I almost didn't recognize myself. When had I started dressing like I was trying to disappear? When had I decided that being a wife and mother meant erasing my own style? I bought the red dress. I bought the blazers. I bought the shoes. Bailey and I came home with shopping bags and silly grins, and we had a fashion show in the living room trying on our new clothes and taking photos. "You look so pretty, Mom," Bailey said, and there was something in her voice. Wonder maybe. Like she was seeing me clearly for the first time too. That week, I joined a professional women's networking group that met monthly at a downtown restaurant. I'd seen the flyer at work and had almost dismissed it. I didn't have time for networking, did I? But then I'd thought about the old Naomi, the one who'd been ambitious and social and unafraid to put herself out there. She would have gone. So I went. The group was 15 women from various industries: architects, lawyers, doctors, business owners, teachers. We met for dinner and conversation, sharing advice and contacts and support. I sat next to a real estate developer named Veronica who immediately started asking about my work. "We need good architects in this city," she said. "Everyone wants to build, but they want to do it cheap and fast. We need people who care about quality." By the end of the evening, she'd asked for my card and promised to send some clients my way. I drove home feeling energized, alive, connected to the world in a way I'd forgotten was possible. When had I become so isolated? I could trace it back year by year. Trevor discouraging me from girls' nights because we should spend our free time together as a family. Trevor making faces when I mention work friends because they're not really your friends, they're just colleagues. Trevor creating distance between me and everyone except him until he became my whole world. And when your whole world is one person, they have all the power. Never again. I started saying yes to things. Coffee with coworkers. Playdates with other moms from Bailey's school. A book club Simone invited me to. A beginner's yoga class at a studio near my apartment. My calendar, once empty except for Bailey's activities and Trevor's schedule, filled up with my own life. One evening, after a particularly good day at work, I came home to find Bailey doing homework at the kitchen table while Simone cooked dinner. "Your sister's taking over?" Simone joked. I showed up with groceries and she told me she was making dinner for all of us. Bailey beamed with pride. "I'm making spaghetti. It's easy." I watched my daughter confident, happy, independent, and felt grateful. She was seeing what a healthy life looked like. She was learning that women could be complete on their own. That weekend was Trevor's first visit with Bailey since the mediation. He'd rented an apartment in the city where we used to live, and Bailey would fly out Friday after school and come back Sunday evening. I'd been dreading this moment. Not because I'd miss Bailey, I knew I would, but because I'd have to communicate with Trevor again. The exchange happened at the Charleston airport. Trevor flew in to pick her up, and I waited at the terminal with Bailey, my stomach in knots. When Trevor appeared, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. He looked tired, older, harder. His eyes met mine across the terminal and I saw anger there. And something else. Regret maybe. "Hi, Dad." Bailey ran to him and his face softened. "Hey, Princess. Ready for our weekend?" While they hugged, I stayed back, maintaining distance. When Trevor looked at me again, I kept my expression neutral. Not angry that would give him power. Not sad that would give him hope. Just neutral. Like he was a stranger I'd once known. "She needs to take her allergy medication at night," I said, handing him a bag with Bailey's things. "And she has a book report due Monday, so make sure she works on it." "I know how to take care of my daughter," he said, an edge in his voice. "Great. Have her back by 7 Sunday." I kissed Bailey goodbye and walked away without looking back. My hands shook as I drove home, adrenaline flooding my system. That weekend alone was strange. The apartment felt too quiet without Bailey's chatter and laughter. I cleaned, I cooked, I worked on some design sketches for the office. But mostly, I sat with the silence and let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down. The anger, the grief, the betrayal, the relief. Sunday evening, I picked Bailey up from the airport. She was quiet on the drive home. "How was your weekend?" I asked carefully. "It was okay. Dad's apartment is small. And he had to work on Saturday, so I just watched TV." My jaw tightened. He'd fought so hard for custody, and then he'd worked through half the visit. "Did you have fun when you were together?" "I guess." He kept asking questions about you. About where we live and what you do. It was weird. Of course he did. He was trying to get information through Bailey. I'd have to talk to her about that, about how she didn't need to answer those questions. That night, after Bailey was in bed, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and my laptop. I'd been avoiding social media since the separation, not wanting to see Trevor's life or have him see mine. But tonight I logged in. I changed my profile picture to a photo from the beach, me smiling, genuinely happy, my short hair catching the sunlight. I updated my relationship status to divorced. I posted a photo of my recent design work with a caption about how good it felt to be back in architecture. Then I blocked Trevor and anyone associated with him. My life wasn't secret. I just didn't want him watching it. Within minutes, the likes and comments started flowing in. Friends from college I'd lost touch with. Old coworkers. People congratulating me on my work, complimenting my new look, saying how good I seemed. Rochelle commented, "Look at you glowing. So proud of you." Eleanor, Trevor's mother, liked the photo and commented, "Beautiful inside and out. Bailey is lucky to have you." I closed my laptop and smiled. I was building something real. Something that was mine. Something no one could take away because it existed inside me, not through someone else. The transformation wasn't complete. I still had hard days, still had moments of doubt and fear and anger. But I was becoming someone I recognized. Someone I respected. Someone I liked. And that was worth more than any marriage had ever been. The peace lasted exactly 3 weeks after that first custody visit. Then Trevor's harassment campaign began in earnest. It started with the emails. My work address, how had he gotten that? Messages marked urgent that weren't urgent at all. "We need to talk about Bailey's education. I have concerns about your apartment's safety. My lawyer says you're in violation of the custody agreement." None of it was true. All of it was designed to unsettle me. I forwarded each one to Tasha and tried to ignore them. But they kept coming. 2 a day. Then 5. Then 10. "Block his email," Tasha advised. "He's trying to provoke a response. Don't give him one." So I set up a filter that sent anything from Trevor directly to a folder Tasha could access without me seeing it. Problem solved. Until he started calling my office. "There's a Trevor Harrison online too," the receptionist told me one afternoon. "He says it's about your daughter?" My stomach dropped. "Tell him I'm unavailable and give him my attorney's number." But he called back. 3 more times that day. The receptionist started looking annoyed and I was mortified. This was my workplace. My fresh start. And he was poisoning it. Patricia called me into her office at the end of the day. "Everything okay?" The receptionist mentioned someone has been calling repeatedly. "It's my ex-husband." "I'm sorry. I'll handle it." "Don't apologize. Just let us know if you need support. We have protocols for handling harassment if it continues." That evening, I filed a police report documenting the harassment. The officer was sympathetic but clear. "Unless he threatens you or shows up at your workplace, there's not much we can do. Keep documenting everything, though. It builds a case if you need a restraining order later." I called Tasha from my car before driving home. "He's calling my work. Multiple times a day. What can I do?" "I'll send him a cease and desist letter. If he continues after that, we can file for a restraining order." She paused. "Naomi, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Men like Trevor don't accept losing control. Be prepared." She was right. The next weekend was another custody visit. Trevor picked Bailey up from the airport again, and this time I made sure to have Simone with me. Safety in numbers. Trevor looked worse than before. He'd been drinking. I could smell it on him even from a distance. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed. "Naomi, please," he said as Bailey ran ahead to the bathroom. "Can we just talk?" "No. All communication goes through our attorneys." "That's ridiculous. We were married for 8 years. We have a child together. We should be able to talk like adults. Adults don't cheat on their wives and then harass them at work." His face darkened. "I've apologized for that. What more do you want?" I stared at him, genuinely confused. "You've never apologized. Not once. I've sent you dozens of emails. None of them contained an apology. They contained excuses, demands, and manipulation." Bailey came back before he could respond. I kissed her goodbye, told Trevor to have her back on time, and walked away. Simone was shaking with anger as we drove off. The audacity of that man. "I've apologized. He's rewritten history in his own mind." That night I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. I checked my phone obsessively, worried about Bailey being with Trevor when he'd been drinking. At 11 o'clock my phone rang. Bailey's number, the phone I'd given her for emergencies. "Mom?" Her voice was small and scared. "Can you come get me?" I sat up straight. "What's wrong, baby? Are you okay?" "Dad won't stop talking about you. He's saying mean things and crying. It's scary." Rage flooded through me, white hot and clarifying. "Where are you right now?" "In the bathroom." I locked the door. "Good girl. Stay there. I'm calling someone to help, okay? Don't unlock the door until a police officer comes." I called 911 while simultaneously texting Tasha. 20 minutes later she called me back. Police are at Trevor's apartment. Bailey is safe. They're bringing her to the precinct and you can pick her up there. I drove faster than I should have, Simone beside me having insisted on coming. At the police station, a kind officer brought Bailey out. She ran into my arms crying. I want to go home. I don't want to visit Dad anymore. I know, baby. I know. The officer explained that Trevor hadn't been arrested, he hadn't done anything illegal. But they documented the incident and recommended he seek counseling before Bailey visited again. Trevor showed up at the station 20 minutes later, wild-eyed and desperate. This is ridiculous. I was just emotional. I didn't hurt her. You scared her, I said coldly. You put your need to vent about me above her need to feel safe. You're turning her against me. No. You're doing that yourself. I took Bailey home and she slept in my bed that night, curled against me like she used to when she was smaller. I stayed awake watching her sleep, my mind racing with protective fury. The next morning, Tasha called with a plan. We're filing an emergency motion to modify custody. Trevor's behavior at the police station, combined with the months of harassment and his drinking, we have grounds to suspend his visitation pending a psychological evaluation. Will it work? Given that he frightened Bailey badly enough that she called 911? Yes, I think it will. For the next 2 weeks, Trevor escalated. Gifts showed up at our apartment, expensive toys for Bailey, jewelry for me, flowers with notes begging for another chance. I documented everything and refused delivery on all of it. He created fake social media accounts to message me. I blocked each one and reported them. He showed up at Simone's house looking for me. She called the police and they escorted him away with a warning. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks after the police station incident, Tasha called with news. The judge granted our motion. Trevor's visitation is suspended pending a psychological evaluation and completion of counseling. And we got the restraining order. He's not allowed within 500 feet of you, Bailey, or your workplace. I sat down hard, relief making my legs weak. It's over? The harassment part is. He violates this order, he goes to jail. As for the rest, we still have to finalize the divorce and eventually he'll probably get some form of visitation back. But for now, you and Bailey are safe. That night I told Bailey the news. You don't have to see Dad until you're ready. And when you do see him, he'll have had help to be better. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll deal with that. Your feelings matter, baby. You get to decide what kind of relationship you want with him when you're older. She hugged me tight. I just want it to be us. Just me and you and Aunt Simone. Is that bad? No, sweetheart. That's not bad at all. Over the next few weeks, the harassment stopped completely. Trevor finally seemed to understand that there were consequences for his actions. Or maybe he was just tired of fighting. Either way, the silence was beautiful. I changed my phone number and email address, giving the new ones only to people I trusted. I updated all of Bailey's school and medical records to reflect the custody arrangement and restraining order. I took Bailey to a child therapist to help her process everything she'd witnessed and experienced. The therapist was wonderful, helping Bailey understand that her father's behavior wasn't her fault and giving her tools to express her feelings safely. Slowly, the tension I'd been carrying for months began to ease. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped jumping every time my phone rang. One evening, about a month after the restraining order was granted, I was cooking dinner when Bailey looked up from her homework. Mom? Are you happy now? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Yeah, baby. I am. Me too. She went back to her work, satisfied. And I realized it was true. Despite everything, the betrayal, the divorce, the harassment, the upheaval, I was happy. Genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been in years. Because I was free. And freedom, I'd learned, was worth fighting for. The final divorce decree arrived on a Wednesday in December, 6 months after I'd left. Tasha emailed it to me with a simple message. It's done. Congratulations on your freedom. I sat in my office and stared at the document on my screen. Petitioner Naomi Rachel Grant versus Respondent Trevor James Harrison. Marriage dissolved. Assets divided. Custody established. It was over. Really, truly over. That evening, Simone came over with champagne and Bailey's favorite takeout. We celebrated quietly. Bailey didn't need to know all the details, but she understood that the divorce was final, that we were officially starting our new chapter. To Mom, Bailey said, raising her juice box. For being brave. We clinked our glasses together and I felt tears prick my eyes. Not sad tears. Grateful ones. The house in my old city had sold the week before. My half of the proceeds, plus my share of Trevor's retirement account and the settlement for his hidden assets, came to just over $200,000. Combined with what was left of my inheritance, I had a solid financial foundation. For the first time in my adult life, I had real money of my own. Money Trevor couldn't control or monitor or use to manipulate me. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. The following weekend, Simone and I went house hunting. I'd been renting the apartment for 6 months, and while it was fine, it wasn't ours. I wanted Bailey to have a real home, a place with a yard where she could play, a place we could paint and decorate however we wanted. The third house we looked at was perfect. A small bungalow near the water with 3 bedrooms, a bright kitchen, and a backyard with a live oak tree perfect for climbing. It needed work. The kitchen was outdated, the bathrooms needed updating, and the whole place could use fresh paint. But standing in that empty living room with sunlight streaming through the windows, I could see it. Our furniture arranged just right. Bailey's artwork on the walls. My books on shelves. A garden in the backyard. Oh, I love it, I told the real estate agent. I want to make an offer. 3 weeks later, the house was mine. Ours. The closing felt surreal, signing my name alone on the deed, no Trevor hovering over my shoulder, criticizing my decisions or making me doubt myself. This was mine. I'd bought it with my own money, chosen it with my own judgment, and signed for it with my own signature. We moved in right after Christmas. Bailey got to pick out paint colors for her new room. She chose a soft purple with white trim. I painted my room a deep teal that made me feel calm and confident. The living room got warm yellow walls that caught the morning light. Simone, Rochelle, who'd flown in to help, and I spent a week painting, unpacking, and arranging furniture. By New Year's Eve, the house actually looked like a home. That night, just Bailey and me, we made personal pizzas and watched movies on the couch. At midnight, we stepped into the backyard to hear the fireworks from downtown echoing across the water. New year, new house, new life, I said, hugging Bailey close. Best year ever, she declared. And honestly, she was right. January brought more good news. Patricia called me into her office with a smile. I'd learned to recognize something good was coming. The firm is promoting you to senior designer, she said. You've earned it. Your work on the downtown development project was exceptional, and the client specifically requested you for their next project. The promotion came with a substantial raise and the chance to work on larger, more complex projects. I'd been back in architecture for only 7 months and I was already moving up. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice professional even though I wanted to dance. I won't let you down. You haven't yet. Keep doing what you're doing. That evening, I took Bailey out for a celebration dinner at her favorite restaurant. As we ate, I told her about the promotion. Does this mean you're not sad anymore? She asked. About Dad. I was never really sad about Dad, I explained carefully. I was sad about the time I wasted being with someone who didn't appreciate me. But I'm not sad anymore. I'm grateful. Grateful? For you. For this chance to start over. For learning what I really deserve. I reached across the table and took her hand. And I'm grateful that you're learning these lessons now while you're young. You never have to settle for someone who makes you small. She squeezed my hand. I won't, Mom. I promise. February brought an unexpected message from Eleanor, Trevor's mother. She asked if she could come visit for Bailey's 9th birthday in March. I agreed. Eleanor had been nothing but supportive, and Bailey missed her grandmother. When Eleanor arrived, she hugged me tight. Look at you, she said, holding me at arm's length. You're glowing. You look like a completely different person. I am a different person. I'm me again. We had a wonderful week. Eleanor stayed at a nearby hotel but spent every day with us. She took Bailey to museums and parks. She helped me plant a garden in the backyard. She told me stories about Trevor's father, who'd passed away years ago, and how she wished she'd left him sooner. I stayed for 40 years, she said one evening while we sat on my back porch watching Bailey play. 40 years of being diminished and controlled and told I wasn't enough. I thought I was doing the right thing, staying for the kids. But all I did was teach them that this was normal. That's why Trevor treats women the way he does. He learned it from his father. But you also taught him better, I pointed out. You showed him kindness and strength. He chose not to follow that example. Maybe. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, Naomi. For not seeing it sooner. For not stopping it when I had the chance. You're seeing it now. That's what matters. On Bailey's birthday, we had a party in the backyard with her friends from school. There was a bounce house, pizza, cake, and so much laughter. Bailey was radiant, surrounded by friends who genuinely liked her, confident and happy in a way she'd never been before. Eleanor pulled me aside at one point. She's flourishing. You both are. You did the right thing leaving. Even though it was hard. Hardest thing I've ever done, I admitted. But also the best. That night, after everyone had gone home and Bailey was asleep, I sat in my backyard under the oak tree and thought about the past year. 12 months ago, I'd been trapped in a loveless marriage, isolated and diminished, believing I had no options. Now I had a home I owned. Career I loved. Friends who supported me. A daughter who was thriving. Independence, confidence, and self-respect. Trevor had tried to destroy me with his betrayal. He'd meant to hurt me, to make me jealous, to remind me of my place. Instead, he'd set me free. My phone buzzed with a text from Rochelle. House looks amazing in the photos Eleanor sent me. So proud of you, friend. I smiled and typed back, couldn't have done it without you. But the truth was I could have. I had done it. I'd found the strength inside myself, strength I didn't know I possessed, and I'd used it to build something better. The divorce was final. The harassment had stopped. The custody was settled. Trevor was getting help, or he wasn't. Either way, it was no longer my problem. I'd won. Not because I'd hurt him back or gotten revenge in some dramatic way. I'd won because I'd saved myself. Because I'd chosen my own happiness over his comfort. Because I'd refused to accept crumbs when I deserved the whole feast. And that victory was sweeter than anything else could have been. 1 year after I discovered those screenshots on the iPad, I stood in my backyard watching Bailey play with Isabella and 2 other girls from school. They were building an elaborate fairy house under the oak tree, laughing and arguing over where the windows should go. The anniversary had arrived without me even noticing until this morning. 1 year since my life had shattered and, in shattering, reformed into something stronger. The garden I'd planted with Eleanor was blooming now. Roses climbed the fence. Tomatoes grew in neat rows. Herbs scented the air. This was my garden, on my property, tended by my hands. My phone rang. Tasha. Just wanted to give you a heads up, she said. Trevor's visitation rights have been restored. He completed his counseling and psychological evaluation. The court is ordering supervised visits to start next month. My stomach tightened, but not with fear. With readiness. Supervised meaning someone has to be present? Yes. A court-appointed supervisor will be there for every visit until the therapist determines he's made sufficient progress. Bailey doesn't have to go if she doesn't want to. At her age, the court takes her preferences seriously. I'll talk to her about it. See how she feels. After we hung up, I watched Bailey playing. She was so different from a year ago. More confident. More joyful. More herself. That evening, after her friends had gone home, I sat with her on the back porch swing. I need to talk to you about something, I said. Your dad has finished his counseling. The court says he can have visits with you again, but only if you want to, and only with someone else there to make sure everything stays safe and comfortable. Bailey was quiet, swinging slowly. Do I have to? No. It's your choice. Will he be better? Like actually better? I don't know, baby. I hope so. But if you want to try, we can start very slowly. Short visits. See how it goes. And if you don't like it, we stop. She thought about it for a long moment. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. 2 weeks later, Bailey decided she wanted to try. He's still my dad, she said. Even if he messed up. Maybe he's learned. The first supervised visit happened at a neutral location, a family center designed for exactly this purpose. I dropped Bailey off and watched through the observation window as Trevor saw her for the first time in 6 months. He changed. Lost more weight, but in a healthier way now. His clothes were neat, his hair cut. When Bailey approached cautiously, he didn't rush her. He let her set the pace. They colored together at a table. Talked quietly. After 30 minutes, Bailey smiled at something he said. I left before she could see me watching. An hour later, I picked her up. How was it? Okay. He apologized. Like really apologized. For scaring me and for saying mean things about you. He said he was going to do better. She paused. I don't know if I believe him yet. But at least he said it. That's a start, I agreed. Over the next few months, Trevor's visits continued. Bailey slowly rebuilt a relationship with him, but it was different now. She had boundaries. She spoke up when something bothered her. She understood that loving someone didn't mean accepting poor treatment. And Trevor, to his credit, seemed to be trying. He showed up on time. He stayed sober. He focused on Bailey instead of complaining about me. Maybe the counseling had actually helped. Or maybe losing everything had finally taught him what mattered. Either way, it was no longer my concern. My job was to support Bailey, not to fix Trevor. In June, the architecture firm landed its biggest project yet, a complete renovation of a historic hotel on the waterfront. Patricia asked me to lead the design team. It's a huge responsibility, she warned. Long hours, demanding clients, high visibility. I'm ready, I said without hesitation. And I was. The woman who'd been too scared to pursue her career a year ago had been replaced by someone who knew her own worth. The hotel project consumed my summer in the best way. I worked with preservation specialists, structural engineers, and interior designers to create something that honored the building's history while bringing it into the modern era. My designs balanced old and new, just like Charleston itself. When we presented the plans to the client in August, they approved everything on the first try. The construction would begin in the fall and take 2 years, but I'd be the lead designer throughout. My name would be on this project. You're going places, Patricia told me afterward. I hope you know that. I did know it. Finally. On the anniversary of leaving Trevor, I decided to take Bailey on a trip. Not to Bali. I didn't need to prove anything by going where he'd gone. Instead, we flew to New York City, somewhere I'd always wanted to visit. We saw museums and shows. We ate amazing food. We walked through Central Park and rode the subway. We stayed in a modest hotel and made our own adventure, just the two of us. On our last night, we sat on the hotel bed eating pizza and looking at the photos we'd taken. This was the best trip ever, Bailey said. Better than anything Dad would plan. Why's that? Because it was real. Just us having fun. Not trying to make anyone jealous or prove anything. She looked at me seriously. That's what he was doing with that Bali trip, right? Trying to hurt you? She was 9, but she understood more than I'd realized. Yes, I said honestly. That's what he was doing. That's mean. I'm glad you left. Me too, baby. Flying home, I looked out the window at the clouds below us and thought about everything that had happened. The pain. The fear. The anger. The growth. The victory. Trevor had tried to break me with his betrayal. Instead, he'd freed me from a cage I'd been living in so long I'd forgotten it was there. I'd rebuilt my life from scratch. I'd reclaimed my career. I'd made a home. I'd raised my daughter to be strong and confident. I'd learned to trust my own judgment again. I'd remembered who I was before I'd made myself smaller to fit into someone else's life. And in doing all of that, I'd discovered something crucial. I didn't need a relationship to be complete. I didn't need a partner to validate my worth. I was whole on my own. Maybe someday I'd meet someone worthy of the woman I'd become. Someone who enhanced my life instead of diminishing it. Someone who celebrated my strength instead of fearing it. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it would just be Bailey and me building our life together, supporting each other, growing and thriving. Either way was fine. Either way I'd won. Because the greatest revenge wasn't hurting Trevor back or making him jealous or proving I could be happier without him. The greatest revenge was freedom. And I was finally, completely, gloriously free.